Welcome back, everybody. For those of you online and in the audience, we are almost to the end. Before we bring on our last panel, just a couple of thoughts. It was not that many months ago, right after the wildfires we just discussed ravaged the Panhandle, that we started planning this event. And thinking about all of we thought at the time that the wildfires were going to be the most important, news story of the year for us to talk about. And then there were floods and there were more fires and there's been elections and, the news just keeps on coming fast. And we are so privileged at the Texas Tribune to be here, a part of the Texas community, part of the Texas rural community, to tell the stories. And I hope everyone is leaving these last 2 days as exhausted and energized as I am about rural Texas. It's been a lot, but it's been a lot of great conversations. And I know that the rural conversation at the legislature is going to be a deep one. It's going to be a substantial one, and the Texas Tribune will be there to cover it along the way. So we hope you will stay engaged with us throughout the legislative session that just starts on the other side of the new year. If you have enjoyed these conversations we've had and want to keep the conversation going, I highly encourage you all to sign up for the newsletter my team puts together every week called The Y'all. You can sign up for that at texastribune.org. Is it a / or a / I don't remember, /y'all, YALL. And that newsletter focuses on all of the coverage from outside of the major metro areas that we produce at the Tribune, again, by journalists who live throughout the state. So with that, let's go ahead and bring out our last panel. Again, infrastructure issues that matter to every Texan, no matter where you live. Last year, Texas voters approved 3 major investments in the state's water, broadband, and energy infrastructure. Is that money making it to rural communities? Well, we're about to find out. Joining us is Laura Capper, who is the CEO of Energy Makers Advisory Group. Her mission is to sustain Gulf Coast agriculture and energy by developing reliable, safe, new water sources from treated oil and gas produced water, which could substantially offset dire agricultural water shortages. Her current focus is on reducing subsurface injections and earthquakes, treating water produced for beneficial reuse and farming, finding new outlets for treated water, harvesting critical minerals, and protecting land and water resources from contamination. Rusty Moore was named General Manager and Chief Operating Officer in 2012 after helping guide Big Bend Telephone through 2 decades of growth, technological, and policy evolution. As GM, he oversees the daily operations and implementation of the company's strategic vision and the management team. Rogelio Rodriguez is the Director of the Texas Infrastructure Fund at the Water Finance Exchange, where he oversees community engagement and the development of financing solutions to bring scalable water and wastewater infrastructure to utility systems. He brings a 25-year career in public finance investment banking, having served hundreds of communities in addressing infrastructure needs and financial planning. Then we have Devon serves as the Commissioner of Moore County, located in the northern Texas Panhandle, first elected in 2016. He will start his 3rd term in office January 1st, 2025. God bless his soul for that public service. He is a lifelong resident of the Texas Panhandle, South Plains region. He grew up in Plainview and relocated to the Dumas area after attending Texas Tech. In addition to being a county commissioner, he farms in Moore and Hartley counties. And moderating this panel is my colleague Carlos Nogueras Ramos, who is the Permian Basin reporter with the Texas Tribune. He is based in Odessa. He joined the Tribune in 2023 in partnership with Report for America. Ramos tells the stories of Texans from the vast, energy-rich Permian Basin. Again, y'all, thank you so much for being with us here. This panel is very important, and we're gonna have some great conversations, and we will see you on the other side.
No pressure, huh? So the billions of dollars in state and federal funding that we can't stop talking about are supposed to be making their way into rural Texas communities to expand broadband to places that are, near inaccessible in some parts of the state, and to improve water systems that maybe aren't there, or that, to establish water systems that maybe aren't there to begin with. And so, this conversation is about, where our ambition will take us, and cap 2 days of talking about what it's going to take to move Texas forward with all this money. And Rusty, I want to put you on the spot here. You are in the Big Bend overseeing broadband. Paint me a picture of the landscape. What does broadband look like where you're at? And talk to me about some of this money that has started to trickle in from the state and federal government.
Sure, Carlos, thank you for the question, and thanks to Texas Tribune for having me here to talk about broadband investment. In the Big Bend region, it is not for the faint of heart. That is for sure. It is high cost, low population density, extreme importance, extreme relevance to the greater good. Our investments and what we look at, what we provide in that region, are not just regionalized. As you look at our 18,000 square mile footprint and growing, 485 miles of U.S.-Mexico border, with federal parks, state parks, natural resources. Certainly tourism is a grand industry in our part of the country, but also is research. Chihuahuan Desert Research Institute, McDonald Observatory. There are many assets within this very sparsely populated region that is defining the greater good, much less our human resources that we're growing there, our problem solvers, our innovators that are growing up within the public school system that we're so proud of. The foundation of all industry, everything that we can talk about, everything we'll talk about today, has a technological need in some capacity, whether it is intelligent roadways, whether it's smart highways, smart bridges, whatever it is, that intelligence has to derive from a solid foundation of forward-thinking investment, and we believe that to be fiber optics. We have built a linchpin infrastructure over this entire area that has allowed mobility to invest, has allowed for, we even support other cable companies. Everything that you can imagine in this entire footprint derives from the network that Big Bend has invested in and created over many years through many very responsible mechanisms, such as universal service. Maybe we also utilize a number of other programs that are out there, which is what we're talking about today. And Texas is being blessed with an enormous amount of money to invest in broadband infrastructure, and more money, more problems. It's really interesting how we have always leveraged private capital, which I don't think is getting enough emphasis in this. Big Bend alone over the last 5 years has invested over $40 million of private capital in the expansion of our networks. We are deeply ingrained in these communities. We are connected to our judges, city council members, county commissioners. We don't say, this is what we think you need. We sit down with these individuals that are the heartbeat of these counties and communities and say, what can we do to leverage what you need to help grow this community? And in doing so, we look at these mechanisms, federal and state financial mechanisms, and they are tools in our toolbox. We use that to accelerate and to accentuate our capital investment and our commitment in these areas that we already serve. We have skin in the game with every community we build into, or every dollar that we take responsibly out of these programs. And we feel that's really important. You got to have integrity in what you're doing. The programs have to have integrity. The recipients have to have integrity. And if transparency and accountability isn't at the forefront of every steward of public funds, then the equation is wrong. And that's something that we're really focused on. It's kind of like when the cow business is good. Everybody wants to be a cowboy till it's time to do cowboy stuff. Then it gets really hard. Well, it's no different in broadband. There's a lot of money. We've got more Acme broadband people coming out of the woodwork. Never heard of them before or where they came from, but they're following the money. And that's a huge concern. And it puts a lot of pressure on our broadband development office to make sure that the recipients of these funds have the integrity and are putting a business plan together to maintain the sustainability, far-reaching, so this money doesn't go to waste. And the concerns that we have right now is that it's all based on locations. It's all based on dots on the map. Is that a connected location? Is that not a connected location? And one thing we have to do, there has to be some sort of true-up process in these programs. I'll give you an example. A federal program, Rural Digital Opportunity Fund, RDOF, concluded over 4 years ago. One of the recipients of that in our part of the country is a reverse auction. They rode it to the ground. They have been nowhere to be seen. 4 years have passed. We have continued our investments methodically, private investment each year. 2,500 locations and counting that were eligible under that program, we now serve. They are now served locations. But under the rules of that program, that provider could get funded for an overbuilt network, while other locations will be left unserved. We cannot allow that to happen. We have to have more integrity and have to have a true-up process in these programs. And that's just one. We're just one carrier. Fast forward to Boot One, which is a great program. We were very excited about the opportunities to augment our private investment with these programs, and was very excited to participate in Boot One. We felt like we were going to be revered test pilots in this and start helping work out the kinks in these programs. And we were more like crash test dummies, I think, when all the smoke cleared, because there were so many issues, and that includes the Broadband Development Office. They got their hard knocks as well. This is a group of highly committed individuals. They're trying to do the right thing, but we're all trying to learn as we go, but we have to learn as we go. And we are right there with them. It is a partnership we have with that office, and we all took our licks, on the front end of this and are trying to improve as we go forward. And it's a lot of money to be responsible for, but the recipients have to have integrity in what they're doing to ensure that this money is going to the right place, which is the intent, and which is what our elected officials want, which is what our Broadband Development Office wants. And but we're excited about the opportunities it could yield in our part of the country.
Rogelio, I want to turn to you because a similar dynamic is also playing out in the water world where you serve. Voters not too long ago approved a $1 billion investment to bolster water infrastructure statewide, whether that's fixing the infrastructure we have or building them anew all together. Talk to me about what you're seeing on the ground. What are you hearing from the communities that are seeing this funding coming down? And do they feel like they can access this money?
No, that's I appreciate the question. So communities are excited, right? Rural communities are excited. All communities are excited about the possibility of being able to address the infrastructure that hasn't been addressed, most of it since the 70s, right? Since the other federal grant program came out and built a lot of these wastewater treatment plants. But as Carlos mentions, there just isn't enough money, and the technical need to be able to access these funds is just so huge, right? There's documents that have to be done. There's financial audits, water conservation plans, drought management plans, engineers, projects have to be spec'd right. And so all these things are barriers to a lot of the rural communities that just don't have that administrative capacity to be able to do these things. So we work with communities hand in hand to help figure these things out, to help find auditors, to help put together water conservation plans, to find engineers, to help do the right projects, right? A lot of times people want to take the project they did in some big urban area and just apply it to some smaller rural community. And it really doesn't work that way, right? There's a lot of other dynamics, as this panel will all tell you, there's a lot of different dynamics in rural communities. Sometimes they're spread apart, they're not very close by, they don't like each other. Friday night football, right? We're Texas, we got to deal with that too. And so you can't just decide that you want to do a certain kind of project. You really have to work with the community to figure out what is the best project to do. And what we're seeing is that with the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, that has a 5-year time frame, next year's the last year, a lot of rural communities just aren't ready. right? They're just not ready to move forward because they don't have a lot of the base documentation put together. They don't get a lot of attention from the engineering world, private capital, right? They don't have a lot of these tools so that they can decide how they want to build their project. And so there's a lot of motivation, there's a lot of interest, but there's a lot of barriers in some of these smaller rural communities. A lot of it is the perception of credit and credit risk, right? A lot of it is the perception of, they don't have the capacity to manage the project once it's funded. And we often say the worst thing we can do is give a community $20 million to totally redo their wastewater treatment plant, but nobody's there to operate it. Nobody's there to fix it. Nobody's there to run it. And so 5-10 years later, they have the same issues they had now. And so it's a real problem to be able to really get into rural communities and help fix the issue. We try to look at water issues as a regional foundation for economic development. And when I say regional, if you're a rural community and you have other rural communities around you, you're probably suffering from the same either lack of resources or lack of talent, lack of employees. And so how do we provide solutions that take into consideration not just you, but your neighbors, the watershed, the water supply, right? Texas has a very diverse view or facts around water, right? West Texas is very dry, right? But everybody's far apart and everybody needs water. East Texas has a lot of water, but there's a lot of water systems there and they're all far apart, right? South Texas is lacking water, but they're all clumped together, right? The Rio Grande Valley. So how do you provide solutions and help communities realize that it's not just about me fixing my water today. It's not just about that pipe or that pump or that wastewater treatment plant. It's about what is that future planning and how do I consider these things and how do I help them spur on economic development? And I want to give you a couple of facts here just to kind of highlight the issue. This is in 2024. Of the state revolving funds that were available for clean water and drinking water, there was a total ask of about $6.3 billion. Only 14% or only 15% of the wastewater funds got funded, and only 13% of the drinking water funds got funded. That left a $5.5 billion gap in 1 year for these requested funds, right? So Carlos mentions the $1 billion that we all voted on last November. It did get deployed, and so about 60 some odd communities that didn't get funded got funded, right? But there was still a gap there. Of that $1 billion, there was still a gap in rural communities that are 1,000 to 10,000 population. There was a gap of $150 million. And in other communities that are 10,000 to 150,000, there was a gap of about $20 million, right? So there's still a tremendous need, but communities, especially rural communities, need some expertise to help figure out how do we do this? How do we do it efficiently? How do we do it affordably? And who can help us manage these projects after we're done, right? Also thoughts around regionalization, coming together with your neighbors. I can give you a ton of examples where communities are 2-3 miles away from each other, but they both have $120,000 backhoes. They both have $150,000 tractors, right? Is that really the need? So we're just trying to get communities to think about things in different ways, and we're here to provide that expertise on the ground, whether it's financial, regulatory, operational, or even sometimes engineering.
Yeah, it was a big investment, no doubt, but still conservative considering the amount of work we have ahead of us as a state. And as I understand it, some of the more recent estimates put the actual cost of updating our water infrastructure to be north of $150 billion in the next 50 years, which is not the number in the state's water plan, but of course we're always updating what those numbers look like. And Laura, I want to ask you, because you're in the energy world, the oil and gas industry, the state has invested significantly in water and broadband. Energy only recently got its one major update, which was electricity infrastructure to connect it back to the grid and expand electricity. But do you see the oil and gas industry playing a role down the line to help us secure our natural resources like water?
I feel very comfortable saying we certainly want to. I feel like we're bending over backwards. We would very much like to play a role. I'm not sure that we're going to be allowed to with current anti-carbon sentiment is kind of interesting. You know, that's kind of this big silent thing in there about oil and gas is just this anti-carbon sentiment. And I think it's really interesting. To me, this has been a very educational 2 days, and thank you to the Tribune. I was just simply not aware of these issues and the way that you're helping sketch them out for us. But I thought it very interesting, all the issues we've heard. You know, never once have I heard anybody say, oh my gosh, I've got to put some more carbon in the ground. You know, nobody has brought up carbon sequestration, and yet in my industry, I think that's about 30% of the conversation is how much we're paying to get rid of that carbon. And if I could instead pivot that energy to supplying water, you know, we could really make a difference with some of these initiatives. So the oil and gas industry, we believe we're drowning in water. We have so much water, we don't know what to do with it. And I actually went through the math an hour or so ago. We inject into the ground what we call our wastewater, which is mainly very salty water, saltier than seawater. About 1 million acre-feet a year is what we inject into the ground. And we need to stop injecting it into the ground because we've been doing it so long, it's causing subsurface risk. You may have heard them manifested as earthquakes. Those aren't the bigger risk. The bigger risk is we're putting so much water in shallow that we're starting to pressure up a lot of shallow formations, and those are in the same vicinity as our drinking water resources. So the best thing we could do as an industry is stop injecting into these shallow resources. Instead, keep that water in the hydrocycle, desalinate it, and make it affordable for agriculture. And why I think that is so critical is if you look at our Texas State Water Plan, I'm an engineer, I look at things, you know, very basically. If we look at 2020, we were using 8 million acre-feet a year for irrigation. The plan says our population is going to increase by 73% over the next 50 years. So 73% growth. That would take us from 8 million acre-feet to 14 million acre-feet. However, our strategic plan is to try to round up 6 million acre-feet. So that's a 25% decrease. So while our population is increasing 73%, we plan to deliver 23% less irrigation water to farming and agriculture. So on a per capita basis, that's a net decrease of 57%. Per individual. You know, your kid is not going to get fresh food. And here I've got this industry that has wastewater, and unfortunately we can't solve the extent of the problem out of that, what I would say is an 8 million acre shortfall. If we keep up with Lara math, pro rata to the population, we can only address about 1/8 of that. So I think we desperately need new water sources, whether that's eliminating waste, finding truly new water sources. The oil and gas industry, to me, is the highest potential volume that could deliver that. I'm not aware of any other industry that could come close to that. So we're trying to speed up that regulatory cycle where they actually give us the recipe book. You know, what does a cotton farmer want? What specifically do they want in their water? Do they not want in their water? It would be up to us to deliver that to you. But we need to accelerate the process because we're having water, getting rid of our water issues. Agriculture needs more water, and I really don't feel the folks at the middle of this setting regulations are feeling that same urgency.
And so for the benefit of the audience, when you say carbon incentives, you're talking about federal carbon capture incentives from the Department of Energy to help trap carbon dioxide take it out of the air, store it underground. And you're saying that we don't have an effort that mimics that into water, and so the industry doesn't have a framework into how it can
Absolutely.
clean the water at a much larger scale.
Yes. That's
So
a
the industry needs instructions, is what you're saying.
perfect analogy that we do have these carbon trading systems. Water is a very different market and entirely different dynamics because we're all accustomed to thinking every good person deserves fresh water for free. It's just a natural right. And so there are really no, that I'm aware of, legitimate water markets, where there's anything, a supply and demand cost basis to that. They're always subsidized. And really that framework is not going to continue to work for us. We've got to start associating value with water. And I think if a lot of us looked at our environmental issues, we might be as or more concerned about water than we are as carbon. So it's a good time, I think, for us to start kind of raising our voice about the water issues.
Commissioner, you've heard this conversation, which has been largely industry-driven, water industry, oil and gas, and broadband. Give me your input, as an elected official. What is it that lawmakers and industries need to know before they start handing out guidelines or pouring out money into communities like yours?
Well, they have to understand exactly where the money can be used and use it efficiently. A lot of times government dumps money out there and then they don't plan for how it's going to be spent, how it's going to be used in advance. We've seen this inflationary cycle that we've been in, our economy's been in, and for the last few years because the federal government basically just dumped trillions of dollars out there, but didn't have a lot of guidelines about how it was going to be used. And so that's the main thing, is we need to, going back, it did do a lot of good though, because going back to what you just said about the leveraging between private industry and government. As a county commissioner during the COVID years, we received a couple of $1 million for our county. The city of Dumas received about $500,000. Sunray, Cactus, the other communities in my county also received some money through the American Rescue Plan, which was money sent out to help local government deal with the COVID epidemic. But they gave us some flexibility on that. They provided that we could use the money for certain purposes, and one of those purposes was broadband. And so we had a private company that had already been in the area, in our marketplace, providing internet service, providing phone service, but they didn't have the money to do broadband all the way out to every person in the county. And so they came to us and we put some of our American Rescue Plan money into that. What City of Dumas did likewise. And so now we have broadband capability or access for everybody that lives within the city limits of those three communities. And even though I live 6 miles west of town, outside the city limits, I have wireless transmission. So I still have broadband. The only people we've not been able to reach are the people that live, considerable distances from the communities. So anyway, it's done a lot of good to expand our broadband. And of course, water projects, Texas is going to have to do an all of the above strategy. I mean, we've heard it in several of the panels today and even yesterday that water is one of the biggest issues, if not the biggest issue for Texas for the future. If we're going to keep our economic development going, and especially our rural areas. I'm blessed to live in the Texas Panhandle where we have the Ogallala Aquifer, but that's a finite resource. It's going to be gone one of these days. And we're going to have to adjust. We've already done about as much as we can do efficiency-wise. When I started farming about 40 years ago, we were using flood irrigation. Today, I use about a third of the irrigation water that I did 40 years ago, but I produce twice as much crop. Corn, cotton, wheat, all of the above. We produce roughly twice as much as what we did 40 years ago when I first started farming. And so per unit of production, our water is becoming much more efficiently used today than it was 40 years ago by far. But we've got to continue to be more efficient. We're going to have to transition to crops that don't take as much water. And then, of course, some of it's just gonna revert back to grassland at some point in time. But that has an impact on the economy of my county, because that irrigated agriculture supports that cheese plant that was built. It supports all the dairies in the area, the beef cattle feed yards, supports all of these jobs in town, servicing those irrigation systems and things like that. When we go back to native grass or to less productive crops, a lot of those jobs are gonna disappear.
I'm sensing a bit of a theme here. The efforts are well-meaning, or well-intentioned, but there is not nearly enough guidance to see this through where it needs to be. And I want to put out this question to the panel and answer it in the order that you like. But for example, Rusty, when it's all said and done, do you expect Texas to be better connected after we're done? Similarly to you, do you expect, that more communities will have access to water, to improved water systems after we've spent this money? And yeah, take it away.
I absolutely believe it'll be, Texas will be better connected. We're very focused to make sure that happens. What kind of service will we get to every nook and cranny of our state? We're the perfect poster child for broadband everywhere. We've heard that. And then I illustrate where we serve. And they say, well, now, wait a minute. Well, I don't know about that. That's kind of out there. That's very expensive. Well, sure, it's expensive. I mean, rural relevancy is battled for regardless of what industry you represent. And there's starting to be a sentiment that, well, it's just too costly. It's just too costly for X, whatever it is, whether it's water, whether it's broadband. My gosh, I mean, what if they extended that to rural electrification? What's the cost per location for connecting a power line out to one ranch? I've always used the analogy, well, my gosh, if it's too expensive, why don't you just cut it all off and force everybody to buy a generator? There you go, it's do-it-yourself power. It's kind of what they're suggesting in some broadband applications. It's gonna have to be a satellite. In some locations, maybe it is, but is that the answer for rural Texas? I don't believe it is. And I don't see economic development springing up around that type of a medium.
So what do we need to get right before we try again?
We've got to get the data correct. We've got to make sure that it sounds like a lot of money. It's not a lot of money when you look at connecting the dots in the state of Texas. So you can't have a miss. You can't have public money being allocated to overbuild an existing network simply because the rules of the program didn't allow for the continuance of private investment. That is like as anti-Texas as you can imagine. Private investment should be a godsend for those who are in charge of public money allocation, because we're willing to make the investment in these areas, then take the locations off the map. Let's drive the money to the locations that private industry is not able to invest in, because it's a 50-year break even on or the location is it's $200,000 to serve, whatever the case may be. If that's what we're trying to do, this money needs to be focused on the hard to serve out to the suburbs. And we have to make sure that our data is correct, that the money is being allocated with the intent of these programs to augment the risk takers, the private investment that says, I live here, I raise my kids here, I believe in this rural area, I believe in the relevancy of this area and what it will do for the greater good. That's where the integrity lives. It's not chasing the money, it's using the money to augment and accelerate the commitment that community providers have in their region and in their areas. We have to get it right. We can't have public money overbuilding private investment.
Thank you for that, Rusty. I want to be mindful of time. In about 2 minutes, we'll start getting some audience questions in. But Rogelio, talk to me about some success stories. How have we spent it right?
Yeah, well, let me respond to your earlier question. Yes, I do think that rural communities will get access to more reliable water, wastewater, healthy systems, but they need a voice. They need a voice. I mean, like the commissioner says, you can't just say, hey, we got money, because money for what? Money for how? What is this gonna look like? So they need a voice to come up when there's money available to say, that's great, but these are our problems. How are you going to, understand our specific issues so that we can access this money and have it do good in our communities? It's not a cookie cutter approach where you say, here's the money, now go use it. A lot of rural communities have specific issues, they have specific needs that aren't always considered, right? We're talking about broadband, we're talking about small communities, we're talking about people. Every place has its own characteristic, every place has its own issues and problems and positives and negatives. And this money, if it's truly gonna be rolled out to everybody, those rural communities have to stand up and have a voice in how this money is or is not being accessed by them. So, I'm sorry, so some success stories. Sure, West Texas, we're working with a county, 9 individual communities in that county. 7 of them are either broken down water systems or colonias, right? No reliable access to healthy water. The county stood up and said, you know what? We're gonna apply for the money. Because why? You need audits, you need water conservation plans, you need drought contingency plans, you need an engineer, you need all these things that rural communities do a wonderful job, but they just don't have the capacity to add that to their list. So the county stood up and says, we have all that, we will apply for this money on your own. We'll apply for this money on your behalf. So here we are, 7, 15, almost $20 million later, and the county has been successful in bringing that money into the community. Down in the coastal bend, small rural wholesale water provider, never really served a industrial customer, pretty much all residents, maybe a gas station or two. All of a sudden, this huge lithium refinery says, we're gonna build in your area. Can you provide us water? So they're scrambling. They're scrambling to figure out, how do we take advantage of this economic development and always consider the existing customer, right? So they applied for money for they serve 7 different entities. They applied for money for 2 of the entities, one of them where this new development is going to be, and now we're hoping to close on that money in January. So now they can provide money for this new economic development engine for the property tax base, but be mindful that they're not sacrificing the service to the residents. So those are 2 great stories of rural Texas that I think can be replicated all over Texas, but those rural communities need a voice.
Thank you. We have about 14 minutes for audience questions. As a reminder, you can step up to one of the 2 mics and ensure that your sentence ends in a question mark.
Thank you, Carlos. You can ask your questions at texastribune.org/ask. We have a couple questions here, and apologies if some of this has been addressed. But one person asks, what about training for the broadband efforts? Another question, somewhat related, for the CEO of Big Bend Telephone: has your company extended any training programs or efforts to provide economic growth in the Big Bend area, like Sul Ross State University? Can there be a partnership with the university to enhance future economic growth?
Absolutely, that is a great resource that we have. We have a great partnership. I'm an alum, so I have a personal attachment to Sul Ross. We work with them extensively. We have a number of interns. We've taken that now into several different high schools in our area to try and get people interested in and aware of the opportunities in technology that exist and how we will train them, invest in them. We work with numerous libraries that we fiber serve. In a lot of their programs, we are working with also groups that have chosen one of the communities that we serve as a digital literacy target, which we're working on as well. These networks are going to be advanced. Can we bring the heroes of our story, which is our customer, can we bring them along and help them understand the wonders of what they have at their fingertips when it's not something they've ever experienced? Can we help them have confidence in what they're doing and not be scared of the cyber crimes that are out there? The dark side, frankly, has never been darker with regards to the way they can manipulate those who are not educated on the challenges or the dangers of being connected. All of that has to run in parallel. And we spend a lot of time as a community-based provider, working even individually with some folks, to kind of meet them where they are. We can't expect them to be where we are, but where are you? Is this something you want to use the internet access as video to expand your, opportunities over video? We have an older demographic, some that wanted to expand their availability for novellas. They never saw the opportunities to see more novellas, but they don't trust that internet thing. We're not going to talk about everything comes over the top. They've got a great Wi-Fi service. They don't know why the grandkids are spending more time there than they used to, but they are. But we love the opportunities for the novellas that we can have over this Roku. But we don't trust the internet. So you have to meet them where they are and then build on that and expand on that. And so it's a lot of individual attention. We are expanding our programs. We feel that we're in an area that those programs can yield the greatest good. As we have our communities are 100% fiber to the home in our parent company's area, and we continue our investments as our competitive company expands. Every time we expand advanced services, we have an opportunity to open the world for the recipients of that. It's extremely rewarding as a provider to see the light bulbs come on and the innovation to pour in, the creativity to pour in, the thought processes with our civic leaders to enhance the communities by attracting industry that comes in, that needs that fiber foundation. All of that is there. It allows people to think differently. It's extremely rewarding to see that as a provider, especially one that was raised in that area that has just I've committed my personal life to seeing the economic development in this region. We're very passionate about what we do and are very excited about what this investment does to the relevancy of our area. We're not second class. We should receive first class services as first class citizens. And that's what we're fighting for in rural America, regardless of your industry, frankly. But the education has to run right alongside of that. The digital inclusion, digital education, cyber awareness, all of that has to run parallel. Otherwise, we're connecting a whole nother group of potential victims to a very intelligent bad guy.
So Carlos, we have one last question, and then I'm going to have you close the program so that we'll just have some final brief comments from the lectern after that, okay?
Hello, Ben Mostyn for Texas House District 107 here in San Antonio. Veteran, spent nearly 5 years in combat. You learn as a veteran, especially downrange, first world problems, second world problems, third world problems, what's important, what's not. Getting broadband everywhere, super, super important in our modern society. First world problem. Water, the most important thing out there. Fuel, nobody's looking for a Tesla in a post-apocalyptic movie, okay? So we need fossil fuels. Now, for a question for you is that you said you have a whole lot of water, don't know what to do with it. Do you have, so if you could wave a magic wand, what does that look like of where you could send this water? And I'm assuming the way you stated that you need to get rid of that water and bring in fresh water. Is that correct?
No, sir, not at all.
Well, hold on, let me just finish that. Okay, so wave a magic wand. You need to get rid of that water somehow, if I understand that correctly. So what does that look like in getting that out of there? For you, and that is, has anyone thought of an intrastate system for dispersing of water? Now, I've long said of an interstate, right? Because a hurricane comes, or this area has flooding, or whatever. We've got a lot of excess water. We need to get it out of there as fast as possible. So ship it to a part of the country, or in our case, a part of the state that actually does need that water. An intrastate system to ship that water from a flooded area to a place in need. Thank you.
So the thinking is we would like to deliver our water to a user that needs it, that we can minimize transportation costs with, minimize any emissions, and just deliver it as efficiently as possible in kind of a prescriptive nature. So our water is extremely salty. I could be 1, 2, or 3 times the saltiness of seawater, whereas most agricultural water, you have very, very few minerals. You want a relatively clean water, but you don't want it perfectly clean. You need a certain amount of mineralization in that water to make it appropriate for your crop. So our thinking is we would like non-consumptive applications. So it could be something like hemp, could be cotton, something that's not immediately going to be consumed by a human or an animal, to kind of get these programs started. We're going to need a lot of connectivity because it's going to require that we treat this water in real time and that we can guarantee it's treated to the appropriate standards. We have a lot of users that want that water. There's, Indian tribes in New Mexico that are desperate to bring water, and people that are, bringing in bottled water on a daily basis would love to have some new source of water. So there's a lot of sources that could take that water, but we also need the regulations that allow them to take that water. And that is really, what's missing right now is this just hasn't received the degree of urgency from the regulators. What's interesting is even we want to control all this at the state level. The federal EPA is recognizing we're not moving fast enough, so they're revisiting their overall guidance on what we're doing west of the 98th meridian, and that's a very, very big step. They're saying, yeah, we can revisit this recipe book sooner than you guys are. Maybe it's the same standard we've got, and you just need to meet what we've, set out for you the last 10 or 15 years. Maybe we need to make a higher bar. Frankly, we don't care. Just tell us where the bar is, and then we need to deliver it. The beauty is the oil and gas industry will pay for about 75% of that because we need to pay to get rid of our water. So instead of paying to get rid of it, I'm going to pay to treat it and improve its quality. But there's still a gap between the cost of our treating it. We still need some subsidization to get it economically in the hands of a farmer. So I'm hoping at a state or a federal initiative, we could maybe get something like a tax credit for desalination equipment that would let you lower the cost of treating that water so we could make it more affordable for farmers. Ultimately, that credit needs to be passed not to the oil and gas industry, but back to the farmer to subsidize the water. That's my wish list.
And I'll just answer your question real quick. The answer is yes. All the cheap water's gone, right? Everybody wherever we could find cheap water, we've gotten that water. So now intrastate and even interstate, given river compacts and all of that, are coming to Texas. So that is all, as the commissioner said, all of the above, right? So that is working. You have pipelines that want to go to Laredo, that want to go to the Rio Grande, right? You have pipelines that want to serve places that don't have water, but it becomes expensive. You got to pipe it and everything. So the answer to your question is yes, because all the cheap water's gone.
I'd just add that Senator Charles Perry has really made this produced water, brackish water, cleaning it up and reusing it or using it for agriculture and other uses. He's really made that one of his key ideas, key things to push in this next. And it'd be interesting to see if he actually comes with his statewide water plan or where that plays out in that.
Sounds like we have our work cut out for us to move Texas forward. Thank you all.
Thank you.
We're just going to have just 2 minutes here, closing comments, if our panel here doesn't mind sticking around on stage. First, just thank you all for traveling from our communities around the state to be here in San Antonio. And to those who have joined us online as well for your questions and your commitment to building a strong future for rural Texas. You can revisit any of the panels from the symposium, including write-ups from our newsroom and videos of each panel on our website at texastribune.org/events. We'll likely have that up first thing next week. And before some final things, just a couple housekeeping items. We've loved seeing people scribbling notes that they're going to take back with them. Someone's journal was left up by the registration desk in case that is yours. And then if I have it in my pocket, we are cleaning up outside, but there are still 10 very lonely, squishy cows that need a home. For those of you joining us online, you won't get it, but there are still some that need a home. A huge thanks to our speakers, to UTSA and their events team and theater team for just being exceptional partners in this. And I'll just say lastly to the Regions team of the Texas Tribune for one, curating this program, but for their service to all Texans. And with that, safe travels home. Thank you so much.